Are we live?
There we go. I think you have the magic, Sean. I really do. Hey, everybody, welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today. I am super excited to have everybody back. We got Steve, we got Travis, we got another Steve, although I'm going to be calling him Gowin because he's always going. It's fantastic. Today we're going to be getting into some team dynamics, but before we get anywhere, I just want to make sure everybody's doing things, hitting the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all of that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, of course, Fridays and Wednesdays. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section, and we can engage those throughout the show. This is going to be a fantastic one. So before we get into anything else, let's go around the table, get some intros. Steve, I'm going to hit you up first.
Hey, everybody. Steve Seapker here. I've been on here a couple times before. Former Marine, Scout Sniper Platoon, 1st Battalion, 4th Marines, former cop. Now I'm a screenwriter. And I'm just happy to be here.
Stoked to have you. It's going to be a good one. Travis, how about yourself?
Retired Army guy. I did 22 years in the U.S. Army, 4 years in Ranger Regiment, and then 18 in Special Forces. And after that, I did security contracting for a little while for a couple different organizations, and now I'm a student.
Bam, learning how to fly. I like it. Gowin, how about yourself?
6 years in the Army, got out, became law enforcement for 24 years. 19 of those years were SWAT. In the last 9 years, I've been contracting overseas for the State Department.
Bam. Love it. John, how's life in the mountains?
Things are great. You know why they're great? Because I'm looking at this panel right now, and it's some of my favorite dudes that we've had on the podcast. Now, I'm not saying my very, very favorite. I'm just saying like some of my favorite characters. And I just feel like this combo is going to be a great combo. So thanks for showing up, boys.
Definitely in the top 5, I think. What do you think, Sean? Top 5? Somewhere in there? Okay.
Okay. How do we get to number 1? How do we get to 1, Sean?
That's the trick. You gotta figure that out first. That's the tough part. So what I really want to get into right away, first off, before we jump into anything, I want to get your guys' basically your definition, your first thoughts on what is the team? Because in order to have dynamics, you gotta know what the team is. So in your own words, what is the team? Gowin, I'm gonna come to you. What do you think?
Different levels of teams, especially as far as mission, what you want to achieve. But collectively, a team is getting everyone on the same common goal, same objective to hit, and collectively working together to reach that goal or objective. Again, there's athletics team, there's military team, there's law enforcement team, there's business team, etc. But everything is based around having that one common goal. Everyone's trying to achieve something. And so how do I get everyone to work together on the same methodology and try to drive towards that objective?
I like that. Travis, how about yourself?
I mean, roughly the same definition. It's the group that's working together to achieve the desired end state. You know, whatever that end state is, you know, like you said, sport or some tactical end state or an education, you know, whatever your end state, desired end state is, the team is comprised of everybody that's working in unison towards that end. Yeah,
absolutely. Steve, how about yourself?
So I'm gonna go down a little different road. Like I think both those from Gowin and Travis, I think both those definitions are spot on. Like that's what teams do. But to me, when I think team, what is a team? A team is trust, right? That's the first word that comes to my mind. Without that trust within that group, you can't have cohesiveness that's going to help you, accomplish your mission. So
I like that a lot. Sean, what's your first thoughts?
My first thoughts are not having given it any thought until now. Teams, of course, I think most people consider teams as like, well, all 12 of us or all 27 of us. But a team is one person plus another. In fact, you could argue that a team can be just an individual if you play your team right. And so we could talk about the external and internal aspects of who we are and how we work with ourselves. And maybe that's for another podcast. But with a team dynamic, you just need one other person. And so I was thinking, as Gowin was talking, I was thinking of the video that he recently put up with his daughter, where he was coaching her in a moment where she was, and I tend to agree, it's kind of what I saw, was about an 85% effort because she was holding back a little bit because she didn't fully trust in her 100% effort to get the result that she wanted. But her dad was right there eyeballing everything. And, you know, he didn't have to say much other than say the right thing. And so to my next point is team dynamics. If we're going to define team, well, I think really what we're talking about is team dynamics, because you, again, can have 12 dudes all standing shoulder to shoulder, but until they start interacting, until it gets dynamic, then the team isn't actually gelling as a team. You're all just standing next to each other. So as I saw in that video with Gowin and his daughter, I saw a great team doing more team-oriented stuff in that moment than a lot of big teams do on big playing fields. So maybe we'll get a chance to talk about that.
Let's dive right into that. Gowin, what do you think?
Yeah, so I agree. I think 5 of us could absolutely build each a team, and I think they would be somewhat successful. And then you would have to dive into the micro with why is one team more successful than the other. And that's when you, in my opinion, that's when you break down into dynamics. That's where your communication, your trust, all these other things that are underlying to build that conceptual team and how to be better than another team, more successful. To speak on my daughter, yeah, so getting an individual to hit their 100% when the time is called for 100%. And you can surely overtalk, and I'm sure everyone here can understand that in a team dynamic where it starts to build molasses and the team can't move because there's someone just standing, just talking constantly. And so I just try to hit the right points in the communication line to get that 100%, that max effort, because there's achievement on the other side. And if you shortcome yourself, right, success is right around the corner. It may never be obtained, but if you think it's around the corner, you'll never stop chasing it. And to get someone to feel that in their soul, to just keep pushing. Now, amplify that to 5, 7, 8, 10, 12, however many you have on your team, then you literally have an unstoppable force because everyone will give everything they have for that common objective, which is success or the mission or the objective or etc. So
Interesting. Travis, you got any thoughts on that?
I think we started off maybe on a little bit of just like Sean said, just having 2 people, but I think we quickly progressed forward to talking about leadership amongst the team, and obviously with coaching, with providing inputs that result in outcomes for your subordinates in this case, or for your teammates, then that's a leadership thing, and understanding all the dynamics of the way that your team interactions with you and with each other, and being able to put those inputs where they need to be to reach the desired end state is just there's a lot of factors that contribute to it, like character, experience, just pure knowledge and wisdom is something we talk about often, and being able to plug all those plugs into the right places to make it happen is challenging, and it's ever evolving, and it definitely takes some effort to make the result what you want it to be.
Yeah. Sounds like the standard collective answer. It depends on everything. Steve, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think what Travis is hitting on is like we all kind of have that same mindset and very quickly drift to kind of that leadership piece when it comes to teamwork. But I think when we're talking about the micro, the dynamic of it, that the team dynamic starts with the individual, to kind of link it back to the last podcast, right? Like as Travis kind of hit on, you have to be credible, right? You have to have competence. You have to be bringing something to the table to help accomplish that mission, and you have to have those, as we've all heard before, probably brilliance in the basics and mastering the fundamentals and all that sort of stuff. When you come to the team, Otherwise, you're going to be the weak link in that dynamic, right?
Yeah, I this brings up an interesting thought in that one of my favorite books is actually Rainbow Six by Tom Clancy, and it's all about bringing a bunch of special operators from all over the world and bringing them together onto one team. They describe in the book, some of the difficulties in being cohesive when you have people from multiple areas. And Sean, you said earlier just a second ago about like, you can have 12 dudes standing on a line, but that's still very different than having a team. And I'm wondering what your guys' thoughts are on like what makes one a team and what makes one 12 individuals on the sideline. I'm going to start with Travis. What do you think?
Some mutual suffering, building camaraderie, and usually the way to do that is to give that future team like very challenging, maybe nearly impossible missions to complete, and then having them do it. Going through suffering together. Like just being together through miserable times creates a sense of camaraderie. Virtually every team I was ever a part of, if you were in the team room with just the team guys, I mean, you would probably think that they hated each other, the way they spoke to each other, and the amount of slurs and degrading talk that was in there was amazing, right up until somebody from the outside came into the room, and it was very apparent immediately that those guys were on a team together. You stand in a special forces company formation and you hear the ribbing going on between the teams, and it's pretty amazing. But those guys it's like having a brother. Like I can do whatever I want to my brother, we can fight, but if you touch him, we got a problem. It's that kind of interaction. It's being brothers, being siblings.
Yeah, no one touches my brother except me. You don't get to do it except for me. Gowin, what are you thinking on this?
Yeah, Travis is absolutely right. Is build that team cohesiveness, right? How get everyone together, and typically people come together under severe hardship, and that's where you find out how well gelled that team can be and will be for future endeavors. But the resounding realizing under hardship is that the person next to you will bleed for you, and they expect you to bleed for them. And there's that bond that's built between those two, and it transcends the entire team. Many different ways to look at this. I agree with Travis, and there's a lot of ribbing that goes on in team guys, multitude of teams, even athletics, they do the same thing. But when it comes down to the competition or the mission, the gel there is they'll do anything and everything for each other. And that's that team dynamic that you really want to strive for.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Steve, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think that mutual suffering piece, we've all been through some iteration of that in order to be in our respective, jobs or teams or units or what have you. And it's like you've got to have that, right? Like I have to know that you will walk your talk, right? Because it's deed not glory, right? Like I have to know that when the rubber meets the road, like you're going to be there and you're going to lay it down for the overall mission accomplishment, right? And for the team. So and the only way I've ever seen that occur or come to fruition is through that mutual suffering piece or that challenging piece, right? Because you've got to build, there's got to be trust between teammates, and the way you do that is getting to that really, really dark place, and stripping away all the nonsense, and then you really get to see what people are made of.
That is a great point. Sean, you got any points to add on?
Yeah, going to try to reverse engineer the question. So, how to put a team together. Rainbow Six, I never read the book, from a bunch of dudes come together, hopefully for a common purpose. But as they all come to get what I'd visioned in my head was a bunch of dudes coming through a bunch of different doors into a large hangar with a bunch of chairs in it where they were about to get briefed. That's the imagery that I had in my head. And so, and again, I don't know how the book plays out. But as they're all walking in, you know how it works. Every dude is eyeballing every dude. Everybody's trying to figure out what's up. Who's who in the zoo? Who's the guy? Who isn't the guy? Am I the guy? All of the things. And so that's just what I've experienced. When everyone's eyeballing everyone, everyone's trying to figure out what's up. But then, more importantly, as all of that's happening, you look to the front of the hangar, to where the podium is, to maybe where a few other chairs are, to see who's going to be leading the show. And so, team dynamics. Let's pretend for a moment that it is us five, the five of us, that are sitting up at the front of the hangar. And as every dude walks into that hangar and starts eyeballing us, what would they be looking for? So what are all of the Rainbow Six gatherers looking for in the sense of who would I want to lead me? Because by asking that question, we'll understand what kind of attributes teams pursue, the team members, the team itself. What is it looking for? So, I'm not saying who would they choose. We don't have to name names because I'd be last on the list because I'm a jerk. Who would they choose for what reason? So that's my question to you guys.
There we go. I like it. Let's start with Gowin. You're on top. What do you got?
So, Sean, are you still live here? Are you still up? Yeah. Give me that question, that last piece one more time.
Sure thing. So if you don't have to pick the person, you don't have to pick the guy on the panel, but what attribute from this panel would you seek? Maybe your top 3 attributes that you would seek as you look at this panel for you to feel like you're on the right team in that moment.
It's probably, I think, the same thing that I look for in others that are joining a team is drive when they stop. So I break it down in between mentality and physical ability. So the body will fail at some point. If you just crush the body, it will fail. But the mind will allow the body to fail much quicker if the mind sets in fast or first. So I look at those things. And if I'm looking at a dynamic of a team, is that their trust, how well they work together, how well they trust each other, how well they work together in unison. And then I look for basically individuals, right? And so a team can have a single individual that doesn't really mesh with the team. He's kind of ego driven. Then it could bleed over into multiple people. If you see a team, or if you're asking people to join a team and they have that attribute, I would absolutely say no, because they won't mesh with the team, because the individual becomes a priority before the team's needs. And I'm looking for a team's need to be a priority before the individual needs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think for me, what I always look for in people that I think part of the whole team dynamic is, we talk a lot about leadership, but you have to talk about followership as well. And when I buy into being led by someone, it's usually they have that kind of quiet competence. They lead by example. They're not. It's not do as I say, not as I do. Like when it comes to military teams and things like that, it's, they've always got that command presence. They're squared away, but there's not a thing that you could be having trouble with or struggling with. Like, I don't know, for example, I'm not a comm guy, but for example, say I'm struggling to set up my radio or something like that. And that leader could easily just step in and be like, no, you got to do it like this. Because he knows all the jobs, right? He just has that competence, right? And has consistent behavior, right? It's not, he's always putting forth for the team, right? And he always has that integrity and character, even when eyes aren't on, right? When the command structure is not eyeballing him, right? He's not faking the funk. He's not playing a role. Like he's in it for every single one. He's not going to ask you to do something that he's not going to do. those are the kind of things that I look for.
Yeah, consistency is definitely a big one. Travis, what are you thinking?
Well, from the leadership perspective, right? In my experience, it wasn't always that in the military. It wasn't always that you got to choose like who the members of your unit were. You know, they would be assigned by somewhere echelons above. However, in the last company that I was in the sniper section, we got a little bit over on that, because usually in order to get to the snipers, you had to be on the assaulters first, and then we would kind of, hey, like, what do you think about so and so? He's freaking doing pretty good, you know, he's pretty squared away. We need to pull him over to the snipes, and that happened pretty regular. That's kind of how we got all of our guys. So, you know, for me as a team sergeant in that organization, like one of the first things that I looked for in an assaulter to bring him over was kind of his analytical prowess. You know, how would this guy break down a target when he was planning, and how much, like, how really into the weeds could he get? You know, could he drill right down on the root cause of whatever dilemma we had, you know, and like get right to the point and solve it? Or was it like a convoluted, drawn out thing? Was he doing things just to kind of impress people, or was he getting right to the point, you know? So kind of, you know, how good was he at problem solving, you know? How creative was he, you know, during these planning sessions, and then during execution, how quickly could he adapt to a problem that presented itself immediately and had to be solved right then, you know? And seeing that, you know, analytical prowess, creativity, you know, adaptability, and things like that was what we really looked for. Because, you know, at that level, everybody was fit. Like, fitness wasn't really a big thing, you know. Guys were more than others, but everybody was fit. So you're looking really kind of how poetic were these dudes. You know, these are guys that I'm choosing, you know, or I'm going after.
Yeah, I like that. The my first thought when Sean, when you asked this question, was the fact that when we first met, when like every single one on this panel, I've been introduced through somebody else and said, "Hey man, this guy's cool. You should bring him onto the show." And you know, we've had a little chat prior to a show or anything like that. And the thing that always clicked with me, at least, that makes me feel comfortable within the team, or that the team is going to work together, is the fact that Travis is Travis. He's not trying to be somebody else, right? And Going is Going, and Steve is Steve, and Sean is like, there. You guys plant your flag. This is who I am. But then you're so able to just slide that into the team itself. You're a constant addition to it, rather than trying to become you within the team, if that makes sense. Sean, what do you look for?
Yeah, I like that, Chance. I think that first and foremost, I prefer someone who, as a leader, who can walk the talk. Like, you can talk to me all day long, and it doesn't impress me until I see you execute against it. It's just idle words. Now, that's a generalization. Understandably, there's people in leadership positions that never get out from behind a desk. I'm talking about small team mentality now. If I'm going to be led by someone within a team, I want to know that they can be me rather than just talk at me. And so walk the talk. That's super important to me. Another aspect is confident without being cocky. But you've got to have a certain amount of cockiness. So I don't want anyone to mishear what I just said, that you have to be confident, but never be cocky. I like a little bit of cockiness in a leader. And that doesn't mean cockiness to create mistakes intentionally. That just means pushing the envelope, having the not overconfidence, but having enough of an edge to your confidence that you'll try to solve the problem in a unique way, in an out of the box way. Do something that no one in the entire intergalactic sphere has ever done before. That's a kind of confidence / cocky I like to see, because that encourages me to push my envelope, but it also exposes me to things that other humans have never seen before. So none of the incredible acts that you get to see on these small teams don't occur unless someone is pushing the pace to a degree where it's uncharted territory. And sometimes that takes a little bit more than just confidence. I believe it takes a little bit of confidence and cockiness. The third thing, I suppose, A lot of the attributes that I look for have already been brought out by the guys. So I'd just be cherry picking generally something that has already been said. But something that Trav mentioned that is still bubbling around in my head and not allowing me to like say out a third attribute is he was talking about small teams in a way that I thought like assault or sniper. Outsiders would think that, well, tier 1 assaulters and tier 1 snipers are like same and they're both small teams on a small team and they're kicking ass and all that good stuff, but they're completely different characters as sniper and assaulter. In the sniper team, we were relentless for teasing assaulters. And I mean, if you want to talk about within team, the slagging that goes on within a sniper team, the slagging is hard. But you want to see harder slagging, it's snipers slagging assaulters. And it's just a thing. And it's fun. And we all loved it. And nobody cried about it. What it did do was create not animosity, but just enough friction that it kept things real. That everyone was kind of, I don't know, you can't say that about me. I'm going to prove you different. And so it just dialed up the game a little bit of friendly competition. What's the word, Chance? Cooperation.
Yeah.
Right. A little bit of cooperation. And maybe one of the guests brought up that term on the last show. I don't know, but it's a recent term for me and I love it, man. It's what we did back in the day. I just didn't know it as cooperation. So again, small teams, though they might seem extremely similar, can be quite different, but that's only visible if you're embedded deeply in the team.
This is it's got an interesting kind of side note here that I wanted to squeeze out a little bit of nuance on. Earlier, you guys were saying that, shared suffering, shared hardship, shared difficulty, that kind of stuff, brings a team together. But is it just suffering? Because, I mean, you can just make people's lives hell. And that doesn't mean that they're going to come together as a group. It just means that their lives suck. So is there more to that? What else do you need on top of that to create that team dynamic? Because I know for myself, when I was on my 3s course, our lives were made to be hell, and not to the degrees of some of the other courses out there, but we never came together as a team. And I think it has to do with the leadership we had, but that's a side note. I'm wondering what you guys think also needs to happen for a good team dynamic to come through. Travis, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Success, a challenge, and then success, like proving to themselves amongst each other that, hey, we just whatever period of time ago that we started this, it looked pretty unachievable, and here we are standing on top of the podium. So the more times you go through that cycle of challenge and success, challenge failure, challenge success, like together, then that's what builds that cohesion. Knowing that I can't really see by myself what to do to make this happen, but I know that Sean is right beside me, and the combination of both of our thoughts together are going to find success. Like, oh shit, man, Sean and Travis can't come up with it, but freaking Steve's there too. So the three of those dudes are definitely going to figure it out. You know what I mean? And the more times you go through that cycle, then the more cohesion and the tighter the unit gets.
I like that. Steve, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think for me, it always circles back to that trust piece. Like when you're bringing a new team together, leadership needs to be able to communicate effectively with their subordinates in a way of like being transparent about, hey, this is what we're here. This is what we're here for. This is what we're trying to accomplish. You're going to be held accountable for that. It's kind of like when you get an op order, right? Like you get your commander's intent, right? So in that way, you can bring your team members into alignment with what your team's goals are, right? Because everybody on that team has to be they have to be bought into the achievement of that goal, whatever that goal may be, right? And if they can't see a point to their suffering, right, then it becomes like kind of like you were talking about, chance of like, well, we're just getting roasted, right? Like we're just getting beasted, and there's no point to this, and whatever. I just got to get through it, and then I'm done with my course, right? Um, and then when you have that buy-in, when they buy into the organizational goals, right, then you can put them in those situations like Travis was talking about, where you push them and put them in a challenging situation, and they either succeed or fail together, right, and they're held accountable for the decisions that they make, and they continue to go through that cycle and gain confidence, that they can rely on one another through thick and thin.
Yeah, I really like that. Gowin, what are your thoughts on this?
I look at it as a cycle of three things. Number one is hardship. Every team's going to go through some level of hardship. There's a period of normalcy. That's your training or practices or whatever you're doing. And then there's success, like Travis was speaking about. Those three things combined together start to work within the dynamics, because there's certain things of the dynamic parts of the team that you can see as far as hardship. How they pull together, how they rely on each other, right? Who's going to step out and lead the team through something that's hard? Who's going to follow? Normalcy is where you'll see how the team meshes in a normal setting, where it may be mundane. It's training. It's something you've done reps of 100,000 times. Are you still activated? Are you still with it? Or is there like a quarter of the team over there goofing off and messing around and not learning, right? So we used a term on our team is we're here to breed thinkers. We can build tacticians. We can build shooters, and they got to have some level of ground foundational skill set. But our whole thing is I want to breed a thinker. I want a critical thinker. And then that success piece, like Travis was talking about, that successful piece is kind of a rewarding thing, and how that team comes together. And it's very easy on that success side to come together, because it's surreal right now, man. We're standing on the podium. We've won the trophy. We got the ring or whatever it is, right? And then it cycles back through down into either normalcy or hardship, because you can't ride success for very too long, because you got to build to get stronger, faster, and harder, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Sean, thoughts on this?
Listening to the fellas, the common thread that was weaved amongst all of their comments to me stood out as pride. You've got to develop pride in a team. You've got to make everyone feel that they're proud to be part of it. And so the reason I say that casually is because when you described your situation, Chance, the very first thing I thought was, yeah, well, maybe those leaders that were leading your course just didn't have all of the leadership tools at their disposal. Either they were being hampered, or they just were unaware that there's different ways to create a successful team. And the immediate thing that came to mind was, okay, maybe you're all lackluster. Maybe you're all underperformers. A great way to dial up the rotary dial in that situation is to orient them towards the other team that is crushing them right now. The other TQ3 team, the other trades team, the other basic training platoon. Whatever the case is, if I've got someone who's underperforming, I'm going to orient their direction to someone who is performing, and see how comfortable they are with that or not. And if they're comfortable with, yeah, well, they're just kicking our ass every day, it sucks, so woe is us, then I'll find another way to motivate them towards beating that team. And sometimes it takes a carrot, and sometimes it takes a stick. But you can't just have one. You can't just have a stick, and you just can't have a carrot. It's got to operate between the two. So orient the team towards someone who's kicking that ass, and say, meet that standard, or it's carrot and stick time. And so I know that's a very simplistic overview, but injecting pride into the situation, I've found, moves the needle rapidly.
That is a great point. And thinking on it, I think our instructors, they only ever used the stick. Like it was just, we got beasted basically through most of that course. And it was, at the end of it, we were all just like, okay, thank God we're done. And then we all separated on to our posts. But yeah, the funny thing about it is that I think there was an expectation that the team would be built, but the team never got built. And I think a lot of it had to do with our own selves, was the fact that we weren't actively building a team. We were expecting someone else to build the team, like someone else to stand up. We needed that leader or that guy, and why isn't he doing that? And so it was a lot of external stuff versus internal stuff. So I'm wondering how much the individual effort that to be a part of that team, to buy in, as I believe Travis said earlier, can't remember who said that earlier, but to buy into the idea of the team. How much do you think that is 50-50 kind of ratio, or like what side do we need to lean a little bit more heavily on? Steve, I'm going to start with you. What do you think?
Yeah, can you repeat that question again? I'm trying to clear that in my head.
Basically, I'm wondering what the ratio is between personal initiative on being a part of the team and the leadership of the team to bring people into the team.
That's interesting. I find like because I was thinking of what you were talking about in your course, where you would just get beasted and you were looking around like, man, we're waiting on other people to, to create this team, right? And I think that happens a lot of times with younger folks that haven't been given necessarily leadership tools. Because I find sometimes, and I found this in my own personal experience, where you can be sitting around, kind of complaining about, man, we've got no leadership. Like, there's no team here. There's no cohesiveness here. There's nothing, like, who's going to lead this? Like, blah, blah, blah. And you're griping about things. And sometimes in that vacuum, you gotta stop. Might want to take a look in the mirror, right? Stop and think about it. Like, okay, well, maybe I need to step up and be that guy, right? And how do I be that guy, right? I'm competent. I walk my walk. I talk straight. I deliver results, right? I hold myself accountable. I hold people accountable. So I think there is a little 50-50 there. And you can't always just depend on somebody standing on the podium saying you are now a team, right? To make it a team. Like, and I think that goes back to what we were talking about, buying in. Like, you got to get your folks that are coming in to buy into your overall mission. If they don't buy in, then their individual needs are always going to supersede the team or the mission's needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could definitely see that going. What are you thinking?
Speaking on ratios, I really don't know what the ratio would be, but I would probably put more ownership on the individual. And the reason is the individual, when you're speaking about a team, let's just say football team, you as an individual go try out for that team. There's more emphasis on you wanting to join that team. If you want to go to a select team in the military, you put in for that team, right? So you are part of that going forward as far as free will, wanting to be part of that team. On the other side of the ratio, that leadership piece, like maybe recruiting, there is a heavy part to that. There's expectations that what you're looking for, you want to bring these individuals on the team. But when you get recruited to a team, what is the one thing that when you get there, what are they looking for? They're looking for performance. They're looking for you to showcase your skill set to join that team. And this is where I would lean more towards, I might change my thought later in life, but I think right now there's way more on the individual than there is on the other side of it, because the fact that you willingly want to join that team, or you get recruited and then you have the free will to say yes or no, I want to join that team. And typically if it's yes, then there's something on your plate that you have to prove to be on that team.
That makes a lot of sense. Travis, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know if there's an actual ratio, like a decisive number of like whose responsibility it is to divvy up the team assembly. But again, I agree with Gowin. Like, the individual is, it's the smallest minority there is. Like, if you want to break it down to whose fault it is, comes down to someone. It's one person. It's an individual. they didn't do their part or whatever. But I think a part of that is also being self-aware, you know, like as you go into this, like there's kind of a couple of kind of people I've seen in my experience with being part of like maybe a higher level or more elite team that, you know, as they're moving up, there's some guys that think they deserve to be there, and you can tell them almost immediately because they don't work as hard. They just don't work as hard. There's guys that know that it requires work to be here. So those dudes bust their ass and they're working hard all the time and they stay. And usually the guys that think they deserve it, they don't deserve it. And they end up going down the road. You know, they come to work and their bags are already in the hallway. That's just the way it is. You know, being aware, self-aware of where you fit into the team, you know, and what you can do to build on unit cohesion. You know, are you the team sergeant? You know, if you're the team sergeant, then you need to do certain things to ensure that, you know, the team continues to develop. Are you a team member? You know, what can you do to influence your teammates to continue to do better? You know, and understanding where you fit in the puzzle is also important, right? Being able to communicate those things to your leadership, to your subordinates, to your peers, that's also a trait that is very sought after in building cohesive teams. You know, from a leadership perspective, you know, how are you influencing the team? You know, what is your behavior doing to influence the outcome of your subordinates? You know, are they looking to you as like, dude, this guy just crushes it all the time, man. What do I have to do to make it to his level? You know, or is your team talking about you were a guy, you believe that dude's a team star, man? What a douche. You know, like which is it? You know, and I've had both experiences. We've had like, hey, you heard who's coming to take over the company? Like, oh, dude, man, I can't wait. It's gonna be awesome. You know, I can't wait till that guy shows up. And then you hear the story like, hey, have you heard who's coming to take over the company? And you're like, what? Oh my God. Like, dude, how do I get out of this outfit, man? You know, so it kind of goes both ways. Understand where you fit in, how you influence everybody, and being able to perform in such a way as to progress the unit forward or the team forward.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Sean, you got any points to add on this?
Yeah, Trav kind of crystallized it for me. The thoughts that were running through my head when you initially asked the question, and can you put the question up again, please, was that, you know, there's times when you've been on teams a long time. If you've been in the game a long time, eventually you'll be on a team. And as Travis said, you find out who the new person that's coming in, and you think, oh man, I am freaking out of here. I don't want any of this. Now, how did that happen? And I think how it happens is this. Everyone assumes that the team before them squared up the person. Now, that's a generalization. People get promoted through either competence or incompetence. People move up to bigger teams based on, we just don't want them in our team anymore. You have them. And they move them up. That happens, man. If anyone thinks that like the best teams in the world don't get people that are a struggle to work with, you're wrong. And so I feel that as a leader, if you're on a small team, let's say you've moved through several teams, now you're midstream between the top game and the bottom of the game. If you're in the middle somewhere, never start assuming that all of the lower level teams that are moving up towards you, at some point in that process, they got the refining conversation from a good leader that said, sit down, we're going to have a talk. Let's talk about your future and how you can better operate on the teams that you're going to be moving into. Because basically, there's a lot of teams out there that will accept a team member and just try to make do the best with what is in front of them, and never consider, I'm going to refine them for a higher level game. I'm going to be responsible to that person to make them responsible for a higher level. And so that doesn't happen always. And that's how people rise up through the system into a position that personally I don't think they probably belong in, because they were never taught to be a good team player. Now, everyone's got their own team vibe. I might be less of a team player, and the guy standing next to me might be more of a team player. But between the team, it'll all sort itself out. It'll find its harmony. It's when the disharmonious moment occurs where the person in the corner who everybody's looking at thinking, how did that dude get here? That's where the cancer occurs. So on any team, if you've moved up the pecking order and you expect the pecking order works flawlessly, you're wrong. It's your responsibility at some point before you pass someone up to sit them down and say, man, we got a few things to talk about. So never, ever shirk that responsibility.
And it is quite the responsibility. I know when I first got into veterans advocacy after I got out of the military, the one big reason I got into it was because I didn't see anybody else doing it. And I was looking around for some tier 1 operator that was going to come down from JTF and be like, all right, boys, this is the way to go. Follow me. And, you know, everyone would just be like, oh, perfect. That's a great plan. Let's just follow that. But it wasn't until, you know, waiting for a little while and then realizing, oh man, no one else is coming. I guess I better start here. And if someone better comes along, cool, they can take over. I don't mind. But
sorry, I realized that I didn't even touch on the question, which is totally my bad. Sorry for wasting your time, boys. Let me hit the question. I think that personal initiative versus leadership requires a constantly adjusting ratio, depending on what team you're in, how far you are in the career, and who's around you. And so let me give you the example that I thought of when you asked this question, Chance, because you talked about it from a basic training perspective, per se. So I jumped back into the hot tub time machine and flashed back to my basic training. And as I was in it, it was a 6-month-long infantry basic training. Halfway through, we had a tragic vehicle accident where 3 guys in my platoon got killed, and we all got freaking broken up as our truck flipped through the air and crashed. A big 2.5-ton troop transport truck. And so up until that moment, I was in a system that hadn't taught me a lot of personal initiative. It was quite structured. I knew what time I had to get up. I know how many push-ups I've got to do. I know what is for breakfast. I know what's going to be next. I know that this is an FNC 1A1 assault rifle. I know how to strip and assemble it. Everything that I needed to know was being taught to me, and I didn't have to use a lot of personal initiative. I mean, you use initiative, of course, but I'm stating that carefully because up until the moment of the accident, I felt like I didn't have to demonstrate maximum personal initiative. But the moment that we were in the crash and we all realized what had just happened, and we had no leadership around us at all. It was just all of us basic training students. The 2 drivers, one of them went into full shock and couldn't talk. And the other driver, who actually was a leader, he looked at me and said, I'm going to run for help. And help was 13 miles away. And he just started running down a gravel road. And I was just left there like, what just happened? Now it's just us, all raw recruits. And so it was that moment that I realized someone's got to do something. And I guess that dude is me. And so I started working on the guys who ultimately died in my hands. And I started working on the guys who were missing ears and broken arms and crushed heads and all of that good stuff. I did it because no one else was doing it. I just stepped up and tried to lead in the moment. There's the triage. There's the this. Do that. You over here. And I didn't think I had any command abilities. I didn't think I had any leadership abilities. All I had was this. Someone's got to do something. And I guess that someone is me. And so I've thought about that moment over the years as to certain people will step up in the moment and certain people won't. Now, I'm not saying I'm a person who always steps up in the moment, but I did in that moment. And that moment taught me a lot that when something has to get sorted out, not everyone is capable of it. So the personal initiative in that moment was on full display for me, and it formed a huge delta for me in my young mind of, I might not be a leader, but in that moment I had to lead. And as a raw recruit, we've all got it in us to lead the way. And I've never forgotten that. So what was my ratio? A second before the accident, it was, I've got no personal initiative. A second after the accident, I've got 100% initiative because I am now 100% the leader. And so this is the ebb and flow of life. The events that you have in front of you, we're not all 100% leaders 100% of the time. And we're not always kicking out 100% personal initiative all the time. What I've found over my years is this, that it's the big stings, the big crisis moments, the big crazy wild went sideways effects that tend to help you understand who you are in the moment. You don't understand it on the highway as you're driving to work. You don't understand it as you're going to pick up your dry cleaning. None of these moments have enough impact for you to stand in a moment and think, what am I right now? What am I going to do in this moment? So it usually takes something that is a freak show for you to understand who you are within the freak show. And the panel, of course, has all faced these moments many times and understand themselves in those moments, but not everyone does. And so the difference between personal initiative and leadership, I guess, all depends on what kind of a life you've led.
That is really, that's an interesting place to go with it. Steve, you got any thoughts on this?
Now I'm chewing on that. I like what Sean's saying, because there's that personal initiative piece. And I think Travis, like everybody's touched on it so far, is like, if there is a ratio, if there is a number, that number is probably larger on the side of the individual. And I think I agree with that. Let me come back to that, because I need to chew on that a little more.
Raj, absolutely. Travis, any thoughts on this?
I think we come back to this very often here. And that is, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from poor judgment. Exposure matters. You gain wisdom through tenure, through learning things the hard way. And, when you have that tenure and wisdom, then you start to make better choices, and generally, not always, those people who have that tenure are placed in leadership role. And then those people have a certain ability to empower others to do things. They can nurture in people levels of performance that maybe younger people can't, and it's just due to tenure. It comes through wisdom and just being around for a long time. You get to a point where you've seen this. I've seen this before, and you have experience there, and you can help people navigate that, whatever you're doing. And hopefully those people are placed in leadership positions. Like we've said before, it's not always based on their ability. Sometimes it's based on whether the other guy wants to get rid of them or not. But as a subordinate, with maybe a little bit more senior time, then you need to learn how to deal with that as well. How do you deal with poor leadership as a team member? When you have a team leader or team sergeant who's probably less than awesome, how do you deal with that on the team? How do you continue to stay on that team and influence the peers, without going too far, and then the team leadership having you removed? Could you do better by just keeping your mouth shut and then and continuing to do your job and kind of like working under the table and continuing to drive towards success? Or are you going to be vocal and abrasive and like cause a conflict on the team with the leadership and possibly influence the team members to follow you and have a clash or a little mutiny or whatever? These are all, I think, individual choices that you have to make, and that comes back to where maybe it is a little bit more onus on the individual than the leader to be a part of the team.
Yeah, I really like the what you just threw out there, the fact of experience comes from bad judgment. I love that. It's 100% true. Gowin, you got thoughts on this?
Talking, it's about what Sean was self-initiative. Some people naturally will have it. They will. They'll kick into gear and they'll start to do something, even if it may be wrong or not right later on in the debrief of something, but at least they're trying to initiate something on good faith, right? Some don't have it. And so, like Travis is saying, that experience is a huge motivator for people because they learn from it. But you can also gain that through training. So in the instance of Sean's story, where he was doing medical aid, if I had never done medical aid ever before in real life, but I did it through training, I would have some basis to fall back on to initiate myself to start treating and triaging. And so that training that's why I believe training is so important. You get the reps there, and there will be artificialities in training no matter what we do, but you can try to make it as real as possible. And all you're doing is you're back feeding that experience in the back of the head. Now, when you get to experience, it's a little bit different, right? More dynamic, more chaotic, more real. And self-initiative, yeah, some people have it, some people just don't. And you can build people to have it even more through that repetition of training. Or if, let's take football team, never played a game ever before. Now they've played 5 games. They have experience of playing within 5 games. And then they practice, merge those 2 things together. And you start building that individual more and more so.
Yeah, I really like that. It made me think of, when you're at jiu-jitsu, when we're training, if you specifically train only at the gym and you only ever roll with the people that you roll with, that's one level of experience. But then you also have to go to other clubs and you roll with other clubs, and that gives you another level of experience. And then you go to tournaments and you try to win in those particular situations. Those give you another level of experience on top of that. But if you only have the one, like, it's great as a fallback position, as a base minimum, but if it's better if you have all 3. I really like that. Now this kind of clicked in my head as we were going. Yesterday we were talking with Chad from Mental Joe, and he brought up the fact that for him growing up, when he made a mistake, he was punished for it. And I was thinking about it over the last night and today while I was out walking, was the fact that it's not the punishment that's the issue. It's the fact that he was never taught how to do it correctly. And I was thinking about my own childhood. Similar thing. I made a mistake, I'd get a punishment, but I wouldn't get a correction. It wouldn't be, next time, do it like this. It would just be, no, you screwed that up, go sit in the corner, or now you get a spanking, or now, like, whatever it was just mistake, punishment. And so I think that for a lot of people, that's a pretty common thing for a lot of people without the correction. Do you think that there are, I guess, I'm going to push back on the idea that some people have it and some don't. I truly believe that everybody has the capacity to be sufficient, self-regulated, or have that personal initiative. But I think for a lot of us, it's smashed down early on in childhood. You guys agree on that one, or do you think it's out of left field? Steve, I'm going to come back to you because I didn't actually come back to you on the last question too, but what do you think?
Yeah, well, to touch on the last question, I think just playing off what Gowin said, I think that training piece, that's why it's so important. Like, with what Travis had said, you learn from your poor judgment, right? And your mistakes. And that's what that training piece is for, right? Allows you to make those mistakes where the consequences and the stakes aren't so high. So again, I'll lean towards that percentage, if there is a percentage of responsibility, being more on the individual, because in those training scenarios, you've got to be accountable to yourself. Like, you've got to be able to talk straight in an after action review and be honest about what you did and what you did not do, and the things that you could have done better. And that takes, that takes some maturity. And it takes a good team dynamic to be able to be comfortable in those after actions, to basically put yourself on blast for something that you didn't do, or something that you did super poorly. Right. Because you always want to be looking for work. Right. And sometimes you don't do a good job of that. As far as the consequences piece that you were talking about of the punishments and things like that, I think come from the Marine Corps, that's certainly, in some of my early Marine Corps training in like, I came in the late 80s. Yeah, that's real, right? You get beasted and you're not even sure how to improve, or what you should have done sometimes. So I think there's got to be a balance there. Obviously, there's got to be consequences for actions and choices, because that's how we build our experience and our good judgment. But there's also got to be that teaching and coaching piece to it as well.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Gowin, you got any thoughts on this one?
I think what you described was pretty real, where it tends to get into an individual where they're now afraid to fail because they're afraid of the repercussions. And so you wonder why they won't push past X. And it's because of however, or someone was in their life that treated them in such a manner where they would never show them the why or how, and they just beat them down. And so, but I will say we're capable of great things. Human nature has done amazing things. And typically what I'll sit down when I talk to either one of my clients, or I'll talk to a sports team, a college team, there is someone that they can recall from that helped them. And they know that's right. Now, it could be where they were beat down a multitude of times, and that's kind of superior in their mindset versus this other person but getting them to recognize there's always some along the way the path that will help you. Right. And they have to learn to let go of that other trauma or other experience that they've had and gain that exposure to, yeah, I can do this. He's explained this to me, and get it right. And just keep emphasizing to the individual. And I'm talking sports team stuff like young kids and high schoolers and maybe college athletes, that they can, because in training, failure is absolutely expected. Right. But what you look for is catastrophic failure. Right. So you stop that catastrophic failure where someone's going to get injured or whatnot. But failure is where you learn things, and you allow yourself to feel the failure, to see it, to overcome it, and to achieve something, a better outcome than having that failure set in. And then being taught to along the process. Now, don't get me wrong, there is usually a time hack in here somewhere, depending on what you're doing. And you can't sit there and harp on the failure and do this coaching thing. You got to get past that. So the gap between failure and success has to be shortened depending on what you're doing. If you're in a building process for a young athlete, yeah, you're talking and coaching is a little bit more wide out. If you're an adult on a specific team that does things around the world, pretty certain that your failure gap has to be way shortened to get back on the process for success. But what you're saying is actually true. I mean, it can absolutely hurt and damage somebody. But this is what I tell everybody. Don't think that you're the only individual in this world that has ever had an obstacle to overcome, because you're not. Everyone has it. Everyone will have one, and everyone can get over it. You have to be willing to want to get over it. And if you know that this way is better, then start attaching yourself to that way. And so someone can be allowed to help you, because you could have the best coach in the world or the best leader in the world. If you don't have the willingness to go, it's on a failed state. Right.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Travis, you got points to add to this?
I think there are some people who are just intrinsically motivated. They want to be the best. They're there to do the best. They don't care what the paycheck is. I'm gonna do it because that's the way my character is. I'm gonna get her done. And that's just how it is. Some people are less motivated. So I'm gonna push back against you in saying that like everybody has it. I don't think everybody does have it. That's not the way it is. Like everybody's different, and some people are followers. The end. If you take two buddy teams and you tell them to dig a foxhole, one foxhole is going to be like stupendous, and the dudes are continually improving their foxhole, and some guys are going to achieve the minimum standard, and then they're going to sit there and do nothing. They're not going to make their lives better. They're not going to make their position better. They're just going to sit there because nobody's told them to make their position better. And there's other guys that are just going to take it upon themselves to continue work and always improve your foxhole. And they're going to do that. That's just how human nature is. I believe that, We've all worked with people. Some people are motivated by different things. Some people are there for a paycheck. Some people are there for the cool hat. They want to wear that cool hat around and walk on post and main campus and get the accolades that come along with that hat. And if they get the job done, cool. If they're doing it for a paycheck and they do it, awesome. Whatever. Everybody has their own motivation, but there's guys who different. There's some people out there who do it just because they want to prove that they can, and they're always going to strive for more. And those people just have that intrinsic motivation in them to do more.
Yeah, I love that. I actually I've just been listening to Band of Brothers, the book on my walks recently, and they talk specifically about that. It's great. There was a spot while they were training at Currahee, and they were saying like every single man there would die for a little pin on their shirt just to get those wings, right? And it's quite a interesting concept to explore. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do have two thoughts, two different stories, and I'm not going to make them long to bore you, so I'll condense it as much as I can. So back to the vehicle incident, or the tragic accident, more correctly. So a second before that event, I'd had no formal first aid training in the military. Like, no one had taught us how to do anything. We're only 3 months into it. And so it's not like I had a whole bunch of battlefield casualty training. I didn't. The only reason that I could take care of that situation in front of me, and by the way, there was only 2 of us out of the 20 plus men in the back of that truck that were had like pretty mobile. And I blacked out. I did all of the things. I had injuries, but when I sat up, I just freaking got to work. And what did I get to work with? I got to work with the preparation that I'd put in place before I joined the Army. Now, as a kid, I was an Army cadet. And so I knew that I wanted to be in the Army. I wanted to be in the infantry. I wanted to go as far as I could. And now to Travis's point, maybe I'm that guy who wants to prove to himself that he's the best at anything that he chooses to pursue. And so I joined a provincial first aid team. That'd be like a statewide first aid team down in the US. And I was just a kid, like 15 years old sort of thing, on an adult team who were going in and doing mine disasters, coal mine disaster training. So I'd be stepping into rooms like with mass casualties with all of the fake injuries and having to work through it as a 15-year-old next to a 35-year-old and feeling like I didn't belong there, but trying to figure out my way to get better at what I thought I might have to use in the future in my freaking little imagination. So as it turns out, when that accident occurred, I was probably the only guy there that was qualified to deal with the situation, even though I didn't think I was qualified to deal with the situation. To Travis's point, there are people who in moments like that just freaking get after it. And that's what I've done most of my life. And it's based on my conviction more often than not, than my self-belief in I'm the right guy to do the thing. Something's got to get done. I'm not going to step backwards. I'm going to step forwards. And hopefully some other dudes step forward with me if something's got to get done. And the people who step back or stand still, that's on them. But the guys who step forward with me, that's on us. And that's what teams are about to me. It doesn't matter what you know or what you've done. It's what you got inside of you intrinsically. And if you want to keep working on better and better teams and understanding team dynamics more and more, you've always got to be prepared to step off, one step forward into the chaos. Someone for sure will step forward with you. And I think I'll leave that story there. The next thing is on this personal initiative. If I would have thought, if during that accident, if I would have thought, well, what's the point? What's the point in dealing with this? Someone else is going to show up. That hadn't been taught to me yet, that the importance of teamwork, the importance of the team, not believing that someone's always going to show up and hold my hand. I didn't really understand any of these things at that time. So as a young, almost like a teenager, as a young man, I had to figure out a lot of things on the fly. And I think that a lot of young men do have to figure things out on the fly. And I didn't know who I was inside at that time. I didn't know Sean as I know Sean now. But in my moment, I was doing my best. And here's what I would have wanted in that moment is a dude standing next to me who had tenure, who had experience, who had wisdom, who could help me shape my trajectory in that moment. Because the lessons that I could have learned in that moment from him would have set me up better for the rest of my life. And so no matter where you are in life, within your early team career or your later team career, always look around for tenure.
That's a great point. Let's go around the table on that one because I really like that going. I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts?
I'm trying to think of come back to me.
Raj, no problem. Steve, you're up next. What do you got?
Yeah, I think looking for tenure, I think, is super important. I think you need to look for those mentors and those examples to model yourself on, right? And that's, those are the folks that I'm always looking for. Is like who are the most professional people, who is always looking for work, who's an asset, not a liability, right? Who walks their talk, and in that way you can, even if you don't have the skills yet, you can at least start modeling yourself on that person, or you can go to that person and say, hey, this is what I'm trying to accomplish, or these are the goals and this is the direction I'm headed. How do I become as professional as you? Right. Yeah, I think that's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. Travis, you got any thoughts on that?
Tenure is, I mean, I can't even put into words how important it is within an organization, and knowing, especially in a military organization, when I joined the Army, I had read at that point in my high school, like every Vietnam alert book, Charlie Ranger book, like that you could possibly find. And those dudes were like, they were gods to me, man. Like I looked up to those guys like they walked on water, and then luckily, I'm old enough that when I joined the Army, there was still a few of them walking around, they were all sergeant majors and stuff by then, but they still existed in the military, and they could provide lessons that were, that you would not get unless they had been around the block a few times. They were, my first ODA, we had a Vietnam vet on my team, Tom Vaughn. He was a freaking E7 still, in the mid 90s, like he had been in Vietnam. And it was like, I mean, dude, he legit would say back in the NAM, and he meant it, and it was like, that guy was awesome. He taught us a lot of stuff, not only about like the technical and tactical aspects of our job, but like, just being a man and existing in this environment that he had existed in for 20 years, at that time. And when you're a new team guy, and you got a dude that's been around on the teams for that long, I mean, most of the team sergeants and sergeant majors were actually junior to him, because he had just been there and gotten enough trouble to be still on a team, and yeah, it was great, and having the ability as, I would say, maybe as a junior team member, not as a brand new guy, but as like a middle of the road guy, to have enough tenure yourself to really lean on those dudes and ask them like some real questions, and seek their assistance, and they have the trust in you because you've been around for a while, that proving yourself that you're worthy of receiving that guidance. Then it's I think it's unexplainable how important that is to unit cohesion.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I got a question here I'm going to ask in a second, but I want to go. And you got any thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, tenure is always one of those things that are sought after for as far as like, I'll speak to mine, is when I came into my team, I had short, mid, and long-term goals. And all along the way was building that tenure within the team. And with that type of tenure and others around you with tenure, you have experience, you have a higher level of operational skill set. If you're constantly lower, new guy, mid-range, you're always in a flux of training, trying to get back up to that tenured piece of more tenured team members. But I wanted tenure for the ability and the love of the job. I didn't want tenure for, like, I think Travis said it perfectly. We use the term a jacket or a hat, right? I didn't want, and we didn't like, and we frowned upon anyone that had that kind of methodology coming on the team. You're not here for a hat, you're here for the job. And so that tenure built for me was, I wanted that as long as I had a love for the job. And when I retired, everyone came to me and was like, man, we're going to lose X amount of experience. You were a team leader, this and this. And I said, hey, I'm actually content with what I've done over my years. And I chose to leave because I had other ventures that I wanted to do. And I left on my terms. We've all seen where someone tried to hang on to their tenure because of the position within the team or whatnot, right? And so they seek that that title, if you will, and not really the position. I mean, I got that wrong. They seek that title, not the position, and that makes them, and it becomes who they are. And I absolutely hated that. So, but yeah, tenure in a nutshell, absolutely. You have more operational skill set that way, and for you to be there, you have much more experience to draw on.
Yeah, I could not agree more on that one, Sean. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, just thinking about what the guy said. I haven't really considered it before. It's a novel thought, so bear with me as I throw it out there. I like what Travis put down and what 3 Arrow put down, and that is, when I was a kid growing up, like Trav, I read freaking everything I could about the Vietnam era. I thought that when I was going to join the army, that sometime in my future, I'd be freaking patrolling through a swamp in my jeans. That's what I wanted to do. I was all about it. How come I don't get to do what I want to do and in jeans? Because it was all of the riverine missions that I was reading about. It was all of the skulking around in the dark between a grassy, swampy, small island and then stepping off and skulking around it and the leeches and all of the stuff. I wanted all of it, man. In my mind as a young boy or as a teenager, that's what I wanted. I was already building tenure in my mind before I even got my first Army haircut. I was invested in the path. My way was what I had envisioned in front of me, and I was going to get to work on it before I got my first haircut. So tenure is a thing that isn't just practical experience. It isn't just a thing that is based on how many MREs you've eaten or IMPs you've eaten. It's based on your mind, who you are, what you think, what you want, what you drive towards, what you're trying to do in life. And I think that more often than not, when someone has stepped up in front of me and said, I want to be this, if they're just starting to think about it now, right in front of me, if they're having this idea of, oh, I want to be incredible, but they weren't thinking about it yesterday, then I know they're not really invested in their game, their long game, the path for themselves. They don't know their way. They're just discovering it in front of me right now, perhaps. And that is a sign of someone who hasn't thought deeply about who they want to be in the future. So tenure, I feel, can be built before you get your first Army haircut.
Absolutely. Now, this is it goes directly into my question here. Travis, you had mentioned a second ago about, perhaps not when you're brand new. You shouldn't be asking all the questions of all the higher ups, but later on, maybe you should start asking. And what it made me think of was the fact that once you have a little bit of experience, you can ask real questions. You can ask deep questions, things that you're starting to see the nuances of it, where you have that capacity. But as a new person, the questions are going to be really big, vague. What do I do now? That kind of thing, right? And so I'm wondering, do you think that's something? Well, let me rephrase this. When I first got into my unit, I remember people just saying, "Close your mouth and open your ears." until you can ask good questions. And it never really I never quite understood that. But I'm wondering, do you think that that is a better way to do it? Like when you enter into a new team, just be quiet until you can ask good questions. Or do you think that, the more questions, the better? You should just start asking questions left, right, and center. Steve, I'm going to come to you first. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think there's some sort of balance between the two, right? Like I want somebody asking questions and being thoughtful about their job, but I also want somebody who's like, hey, just keep your mouth shut and it may become apparent to you, right? Just because you don't know the answer to that, it's maybe that's that's like when you're given a brief or something like that, and you have somebody raising their hand every 2 seconds during your brief, and it's like, well, if you would stop raising your hand and let me finish my brief, that question might be answered before we finish this thing. Um, so yeah, so I think there's a balance there.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Travis, what do you got?
I think there's two types of people here that you're talking about, right? And one of those people, they want to learn, right? So they're asking you a question because they want to learn. There's another type that wants the right answer, and those people are different, right? And in most organizations that I've been a part of, kind of the protocol was keep your mouth shut until you can ask a smart question, and that has been taught to subordinates or junior guys because of experience and tenure. Like the elders understand that you don't know enough to even ask a question yet, so if you're not asking, what's the right place, what's the right time, what's the right uniform, then the question, you probably are going to screw it up anyway. So just don't ask it. Right place, right time, right uniform, and then you'll learn from that point forward, and then you'll get to a point where you can ask a real question, and then as time moves on, then you it's kind of just, you got a feeling, hey, I could ask my team leader about this, and then you understand almost immediately if you were correct, because he'll teach you something or he'll teach you a lesson, and it just evolves, and then you get to a point where, hey man, I've been around for a couple years now, and I'm not senior by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm newer than them new guys. And then, maybe I'm going to teach these new guys some stuff that I learned in my first year, and now you're becoming a leader yourself for those new guys. You're not in a leadership position or a leadership role, but you are an example because you have made it farther than they have come. So you have lessons to give them. And as a senior leader, if you see that happening with your junior guys, they're teaching people on their own. They're not being told to directly or whatever. They're just taking their own initiative and doing that. Then you take note of that as a leader also, and then maybe you'll bump those guys ahead and like move them down the road a little bit more quickly than they would have gone had you not pushed them down the road a little bit more. Giving them more responsibilities and challenging them more to develop their leadership is something that leaders do for their subordinates. So
yeah, 100%. Going, what are you thinking?
I think Travis and Steve both said that all encompassing very well. It's I'll just add my 2 cents to this as far as something as a task, right? Breaching. Everyone knows breaching, right? So new guy getting a POI on breaching, and they won't stop asking the questions. And then like what Steve was saying is, if you just be quiet for a minute, the answer might be apparent to you by the end of the POI or the mid POI or something, right? So those, what I have seen in my experience, is the analytical type people that just need more information before they act on something. It's just never enough. It's never enough. And so what I would tell guys is, hey, listen to everything. Just listen to everything. And again, the answer might come to you within the end of the day or mid of the day. And so be careful asking too many questions, because what asking too many questions does, it stifles the task. The task never gets completed because you're sitting there too much, asking too many questions. And if you just listen, get through it, you will have your paragraph of questions when you start it. By the end of it, it'll come down to maybe 1 or 2. And those might be applicable and they might be good answers. And if instructor says, hey, any questions, Yeah, when you covered confined space breaching, you were telling us to stand here. Yeah, they'll clear that up, and then bam, you're off, and you're end of the day, and everything looks good, right? But yeah, there's definitely too many people that ask too many questions, and it stifles the task. And then there's people that can hold back and listen in and just listen, and at the end of the day, maybe one or two if it's applicable, right?
Yeah, 100%. Sean, any points on this?
Yeah. Asking all the questions versus asking good questions, I think comes down to, well, what's the answer? You can ask questions all day long, but you may never get your answer. And what is the answer? What is the problem that we're working against? So let's pretend that the problem is a door breach, as Steve said. So if someone continually asks questions before the charge gets popped, they'll never have their answer because they never got to participate in the solution. They just relentlessly ask questions. And so sometimes you just have to sum up and participate in the moment, observe the solution, and see if that answered your question. And so my statement would be this: understand the problem that you're working on before you just keep relentlessly asking questions. More often than not, this is what I've seen. Someone who just won't shut up with the questions is only doing it because they want you to give them their answer. They have an answer in their head, and they're going to keep asking the question until finally you give them the answer that they want. And so in those cases, it's always best to say, sum up, get in the stack, do your job. We'll talk about it later. That is arguably the best way to do it in those moments. Now, if you're not, I don't want to squash the idea that you should ask questions if you're either frustrated or you're discouraged or you're confused. Ask the question, but don't go on constant send, because eventually you'll be that guy. The guy who typically cried wolf, the guy who typically won't shut up, the guy who just likes to hear himself talk. Eventually, people just stop listening. And that's a fact. So, what do you do? How do you find the right balance? Because there's a pile of different rooms that you're going to step into in your life. And some of those rooms will be rooms that you belong in, some you don't belong in, some you'll wonder if you should be in. All of these rooms, you've got to read the room. You can't just barge in and start blasting out questions at the guy who's leaning back in his chair in the corner with his arms folded, who's been there for 47 decades. Built the room. If you don't know the lay of the room and you're barking at the guy who built the room, you're way out of line. So you've got to step in, read the room, and understand who you are in that room. So if you've got a question and there's a guy in the corner who's the most experienced, don't head straight for him. Head for a guy that's somewhere in the middle of the room, who's been in there a couple of years and will put up with your relentless questions. Because you know who won't put up with your relentless questions? Because he's had several decades of it, is the most squared away guy in the corner who's been there 47 decades. He just ain't going to be into it. So read the room, choose who you're going to bother, and then do it delicately so that you can be part of the long game.
This is really interesting, and I'm loving this. The whole conversation about team dynamics is amazing, but it kind of ties in to what we were talking about earlier. I think it was Travis was saying something about the expectations versus understanding. And to your point, Sean, I think that, a new guy that's pointing a finger and saying, "Hey, give me all the answers," has an expectation that someone is going to give them. They've been fed answers before, whereas somebody who actually can walk in the room and read it, even half-heartedly, and just be like, "You know what? Not going to talk to that guy," and let's ask somebody beyond that. Is they're understanding the room, they're understanding their role a little bit better. I did have a specific question for Travis here, is that when I asked Travis originally asked what the topic was going to be for today, and I was like, well, I hadn't picked one yet. Do you have anything on that you want to talk about? And he was like, yeah, team dynamics. Let's do it. And I was like, sweet, sounds good. So the question I have for you, Travis, is what were you thinking about when that concept came into your head? What was the itch that you wanted to scratch with this combo?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure. It's just it's a fun topic. It provokes a lot of things. You come back to there's so many parts of it, right? We've gotten into a few, the individual responsibilities, the leadership responsibilities, the peer responsibilities. Like there's so much to it, and it's such a wide open topic. There's just so much there, like where will it go? Like what will we talk about?
100%.
I could probably just dwell on this question about questions for quite a while. Also, like when you get to that middle of the road, say you've been on a team for like 6-8 years, you've been there for a little bit, but you're not the 12-year, 13-year guy. You ask some good questions. Sometimes those questions provoke other questions because they're good. And then your leadership is like, oh, cool, man, I didn't think of that. I'm glad you asked that question. And you're not quite there when you're the new guy, and I think that's what we were all getting at in the beginning. And I mean, for me, again, every organization I've been a part of that's kind of the protocol is to stay quiet when you're new, and you'll learn, and you'll eventually learn what questions that need to be asked and what questions do not need to be asked. But I mean, the whole team thing is a great topic.
Absolutely. The thing I want to ask specifically for yourself and the rest of you guys is, what do you think is the biggest misunderstanding when it comes to team dynamics? What do you think that with the teams that you've been in, what's the common root? What's the one issue where you're like, man, wish that was sorted out? What do you think?
I would say that when people see a team that's freaking dynamite, they think it just comes easy. Like that team just has a gift and they're just awesome. And they don't see all the behind the scenes work that goes into building a team that's awesome. It takes effort, it takes effort. It's like a marriage, dude. Like it's not awesome just by chance. It takes effort from everybody involved, from the leadership to the team members, the higher organization, what missions they're assigning. Like it takes a lot of energy, thought, and physical output to build an awesome team.
That makes total sense. Gowin, what are you thinking on this?
One of the common things that I've seen, and it's not widely common, but it's one of the things we detour away from, is that when you make the team, that is not the finish line. That is the start line. That's when everything begins. That goes into what Travis is saying, is like all that extra hard work that makes that team look so fluid. It's because of the hard work that's just a lot of everyone sees. They just see a successful mission or a successful football game, and they think, oh, I want to be part of that. That's a good driver to be part of that because it's successful. But when you get there, you don't just kind of kick your heels back and I did enough just to get here. Now it's coast time. Nope. That's when the real work. You think maybe selection was hard. The building that tenure is 10 times harder because you're proving yourself every single day why you belong on that team.
I like that. I like that a lot. Steve, you got any points to add?
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I mean, I think we've all heard the term before. Selection's never ending process, right? Like you constantly have to prove yourself, right? And if you put it into the sports analogy, right? Like championships are built in the off season, right? They're not won during the season, right? I've already won the championship during my off season because I've been willing to put in the work, the preparation and the planning, and put the blood, sweat, and tears into it. And that's where your good teams are built, right? And that's what we've all talked about, that shared suffering and all of that sort of thing, right? Putting in the work, being brilliant in the basics, and being willing to do that. Like that's all the behind the scenes stuff that people never see, right? And they just think that kind of happens automatically, but it takes a great deal of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, a lot for sure. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
To your question, the first point would be I wouldn't term it as difficulty, but I would term it as a sticking point. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and that is, and I'm not talking about just military teams, I'm talking about other teams in my civilian life that I've been involved in. And it's this simple reality that not a lot of people understand how far they can push themselves. A lot of people don't understand what they're capable of. They don't understand that their full human experience is way more than they believe. And so I've found it, again, as a pet peeve of mine, that so many people accept the fact that mediocrity is enough. And so they don't know what they're capable of. And no one has ever encouraged them to be 4 times, 10 times, 100 times the person that they are right now. And so if I'm the first person to stand in front of them and say, and this is not how I do it, but I'm just going to paraphrase, are you freaking kidding me right now? We're going to smash. And you're about to be introduced to a whole different version of yourself. Now, there's a nice way to say that. There's a polite way to say that. There's a refined way to say that. But that's how I think. And so the difficulty that I've found for Sean personally, not about the team, it's about the individuals on teams who don't believe that they've got more to give. They're not even aware that they have more to give. So that's a difficulty that I have experienced in teams, even in the best of teams. Helping a person understand that they've got more to give is tricky. I guess the other thing is, the flip side of that coin is people who are on teams, whether they are an underperformer or an overperformer or they're meeting the standard, that has nothing to do with my next statement. A squared away team, a good team, a high-performing team is observed by outsiders or external observers, plus of arm's distance observers. That team is observed as, that doesn't look that difficult. Pretty sure I could do that by the end of today. And it's because they've never been exposed to the harsh reality of what it took to be on that team. From an external perspective, on a video on Instagram, a team flowing through a building like magic and doing things appears to be doable to the average observer. And I think it's a lot to do with a lot of Hollywood influence. It's a lot to do with a lot of social media influence, that people can watch something and believe that they are Jason Bourne, which is precisely what I talked about this morning as I did a little Instagram post, which I'm sure will annoy a few people, but you guys will see that later. I think my biggest problem from an external observer's perspective is that they believe that it's an easy path to be on good teams, when we all know that that is not the case. And I'm not sure where society's disconnect occurred, where by watching it, you are it. I don't know when that happened, but it has happened. And I'm curious as to whether you guys have any ideas on that.
That's a dang good question. I'm going to start with Gowin on this one. You look like you got something to...
So I guess there is a perception of what people look on the outside, and I don't even want to get into the social media thing, because that's just, built to be fake and to sell and like and stuff like that. And not all of it is, but for what you're talking about is people like, oh, I could do that. I don't think they have the perception of what it takes to get there, and we've all talked about it, right? And so if you are a person that wants a little bit of knowledge and you read up on some stuff, you'll find out very quickly what it takes to get to a team. And if you don't, and it's vague for a reason, because it's going to hurt. So I think just looking outside into a team, there's a couple of things that you could look at. Is you can see sloppiness of a team. There's no fluidity to a team, or a team that is cohesive and successful. And I mean, it doesn't take someone that's skilled into something to see the fluidity of a team, right? And how well they perform together. And so internal drive, someone's drive to be part of something greater than just themselves, right? Looking for a team concept, and some people are driven towards that. everyone with the same kind of goal methodology as far as advancing towards a successful end state is a high valued thing for them, and they'll do whatever it takes. And there are some people like, I came here and I had no idea what to expect. I just did it and I went through it. And sometimes that's the best case, because sometimes you read way too much and it could just clog the brain of like, it's going to hurt. I don't want to do that. And you start insetting that doubt. And there's people that can read and not say, no, I can get through that. Different dynamics, different people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Steve, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I don't know. I've been chewing on the difficulty piece, because I don't think I answered that the first time around, like difficulties that I've experienced in teams. And I think, like, I wanted to circle back to that. I think that the difficulties that I've seen are the lack of purpose, or the lack of mission, and the lack of buy-in from individual team members. Like, I think Gowin had touched on this before, and I know Travis did as well. Of like, hey, they got there, right, and they're wearing the hat, so now I'm good, and I know there were some issues on a SWAT team that I was a part of, that was very much the case, where folks would make it through selection, and were very, like, on training days, like it was more about playing dress up than it was about actually getting things done, and training, and preparing for scenarios that you might face. So I think those are the kind of things that I see are always, they always kind of like roll back to that communication piece of like communicating the standard, and like, what are we trying to accomplish here, and getting that buy-in from those team members. Because if you have individuals that just go through the selection, like, you're going to have people that can make it through, they can take a beating, and that will make it through. We've all seen them. They make it through. And then it's kind of like, well, I did it, so I'm the guy, like, that's it. And they stop learning, they stop putting forth effort, or what have you. And you've and those are the kind of people, like, you've got to weed out, and you got to send them down the road.
Yeah, 100%. Trev, you got any thoughts? You're muted there, Trev.
I think I said earlier about, like, that was based on an outsider's perspective of what they might misunderstand about a team, and I still think that's how much work it takes to be there. But as a team member, some of the things that I've found to be the most difficult on a team would be, when you're working in an environment where people are, probably well above average, is trying to slow them down, just to define people's responsibilities and try to keep them in their lane, because generally they finish their responsibilities relatively quickly, and then they're on to helping their buddy. And you're like, hey man, I wanted you to freaking finish what you're doing and then go here. But without knowing that yet, they just automatically go to do something else, and they're trying to help all the time. And sometimes that causes them to go in the wrong direction, because they're just trying to do everything, and that comes with that intrinsic motivation. They just want to be doing stuff, not realizing that doing something is not contributing to the end state that the team is after, and that is a leadership challenge, in defining the end state, and also making sure that everybody understands their lane and how they fit together. And sometimes with abbreviated timelines and stuff, you can't really explain all those details, and you need to give people marching instructions, and they need to move, and then they might not understand what the other team's doing. If you're doing split team ops, or you got 4 sniper teams out, they might not have the complete picture when they're already en route to the objective. But by the time it all goes down, everybody will have a clear picture of what's taking place. But when you kind of the higher level of performance you get, the more challenging it is to just keep your guys under control, I guess, because they just want to do everything. And they truly believe that they do it the best. So, that may be true, and trying as a leader to empower the strengths in your individual team members without stifling the other team members is sometimes a challenge. Like the most rock star dynamite building climbing dude you got is also like 6'3" and weighs 230. The smaller dude might be like, "Are you kidding me? You're picking him, dude?" And you're like, "I mean, he moves like a gorilla, bro. The guy can freaking climb up a flat wall, And like handling all those dynamics with really motivated dudes is a challenge, keeping them from each other's throat. Sometimes you got to tell them, "Hey man, put the red man suit on and go to the dojo and just settle shit, and then come back to the team room when you're ready."
It's I think I mentioned this a number of times throughout the show, but when you're training horses, you always want to rein the horse in rather than slacking it off, right? You don't want a horse that you have to kick to move forward. You want them always constantly just on the bit, just a little bit, just so that they're always moving forward without help. But Sean, when you
I
asked
don't
that
agree with
question,
that.
you don't agree with
I
that?
don't. No, I don't. No, I don't. Got to let that horse run, man. See what it's capable of. And that's how a couple of dudes end up in a room planning how to skydive out of the space shuttle to save the world. That's what guys do. Guys who've got some hard charge in them. Once the hard charging's done and they've got a spare moment, they're looking to hard charge again. So they'll design the next thing. They'll get out of control. They'll think like freaks unless you rein that in. And so sometimes you've got to let the horse run and see what it gets up to. Maybe it'll get up to something good. Or maybe it'll jump your neighbor's fence and eat all the grass, whatever. You've got to see how the horse operates. You got to give it the liberty to see what it's capable of, and then maybe rein it in, or maybe encourage it to really try and skydive out of the space shuttle. There's people in the world that as they move higher and higher up the liberty ladder of freedom of thought, freedom of action, freedom of solution producing, they will come up with some of the craziest ideas you've ever heard in your life. I have heard some things that I can never repeat out loud because they're just not things that you can talk about, but they are wild things. And people get to work on those wild things. And that's not for everyone. It's for certain people on certain teams who have good team dynamics that are used to creating solutions out of problems. So there's certain horses that have got to run wild, but there's a whole pile of horses that have got to be reined in. And knowing when to do that as a leader on a small team gets really complex. As Travis said, when you're in a room full of wild dudes, wild things happen. And you've got to be prepared for the complexity of the wildness. If you walk into a mediocre room, it's yawnerific easy. There's no complexity to that room. The wild bandwidth that you'll get in a room full of high performers is something that most people aren't familiar with.
That makes sense. Yeah. I was just referring to the fact that you want people that their bias is movement rather than their bias to slow down or stop. But 100%, you're 100% correct. What I was going to say a second ago was the fact that earlier when you asked the question about why people out in the world they look at people after lots of training and say, "Oh, I could do that." It reminded me of this quote. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I think that's exactly why it happens. Because when you take a team and you get them to the level that you guys are used to, and you let them run free, they make it look easy. So that people look at it and say, "Oh yeah, that looks pretty simple. That's not a big deal. I should be able to walk through a room. Da 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 da. Da. No issues." Because of all the training that you've done, because of all of the you do it so that you can make it look easy, and then it looks easy. So my question to you guys is, how do we, I guess, inform the public? How do you show some of the difficulty that it took to get there, without it affecting the quality of work that you're putting out? Steve, I'm going to go with you. What do you think?
Do we have to inform the public? Like, why do we have to inform the public? Right. You know, if if you see that and are inspired and want to be part of a team or something like that, then, you know, put your hand up and step forward. I'm not sure. I'm not sure why do you feel we need to inform the public?
Well, just so there isn't the confusion, I guess, is my general thought on that. But because Sean raised it as perhaps a sticking point of why some people are out there that think it's simple. And I was wondering, well, how do we make it so that they can see that it's not simple? It just looks simple. If that makes more sense.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, I just think there's people out there that are there's always gonna be those guys that are gonna be like, oh, that's easy, I can do that. Like, for like jumping out of an airplane, right? You see that enough on television, or on Instagram. Uh, Everybody skydiving or static line or whatever, and I know there are plenty of people that have never done it and have looked at that and go, yeah, I could do that. It's a different thing when the door opens, right? And you're up there in the plane, and it's a different thing. Some people aren't built for it. Some people are. So I think you're always going to have those kind of people, that have an understanding that anything worth having or anything worth doing, takes work. Um, and then you're gonna have these other people that they just don't get it, you know, no matter how much explaining you do.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Travis, you got any thoughts on this?
I don't think we need to tell anybody either. I mean, that's not as part of the team, my responsibility is to the team. If you're not on the team, I don't care what you think, honestly. I just don't care. So there is one thing, though, I think we haven't hit on yet, and that is, as an individual, is I think you need to be thankful that you are a part of the team, right? You need to be grateful that you are on the team. You need to, have some pride in that team, and you need to care about it. As one of the key components of good team building is making sure that the people that are on the team are grateful to be there. They don't want to be somewhere else. They're not aspiring to be on the team next door or whatever. And sometimes there's stepping stones to get there. And they're going through those stepping stones with the goal of achieving whatever higher team that might be. But if you have people without some fondness for where they're at, then those people are cancer to that good cohesive team organization. So being grateful for where you're at and what you're doing is also a thing that I think is pretty important.
Yeah, having the presence of mind to know where you're at. I love that.
Yeah.
Going, what do you think?
I think there's probably too much information out there. There's enough information for people to look at and already know. And every 350-pound dude is a wide receiver on Sunday. And they're like what Steve was saying. Yeah, I could do that. I could do that. People just run their mouths too much. They can talk, right? And there's no perception of reality. But if you look up NFL Combine, there's all the information what those guys go through. If you look up documentaries on NFL, you can watch what they do, right? And there's just a misconception of like, yeah, I could do that. And that's that guy on the couch yelling at the wide receiver, I could have done that. You should have done this. You should have done that, right? But as far as probably law enforcement, there is a piece of law enforcement that has to be informative to the public. There just is that piece. The military, a little bit, but more of the macro. And when you get in very specific stuff, probably shouldn't be said, doesn't need to be said. But again, you could literally research that stuff and find enough content to know,
100%. Sean, any thoughts on this?
No, I didn't have any thoughts initially. I was just curious as to what the fellas thought on the subject, and it's in line with my thoughts as well. So I really don't have anything to add.
Bam. I like it. Well, this is we're just about at 2 hours, so I think this is a great place to kind of sum it up. We've what do you got, Steve?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on what Goins had said about law enforcement. Law enforcement's a little interesting because, like you said, you do have to have a little bit more of that communication piece with the public, and there's so much misinformation or disinformation in accordance with like what what people actually understand as their rights and the laws that they're governed under. Like I think you do have to, in some ways, communicate a lot of the work and a lot of the training, and in particular the difficulty of the job, right? Um, because people are just so ignorant of the rules that they're governed by or that they've bought into. Um, so I think law enforcement's a little bit different in that aspect, right? Like I don't think you need to show them like necessarily the training pieces or the difficulty of that sort of thing. But you do need to be able to communicate in some way the difficulty of that landscape and of the decisions that are being made, in particular use of force decisions, so that people actually understand the laws that govern those actions. Because everybody's got an opinion after somebody gets shot in the face in on a traffic stop or something like that, and they just don't understand the actual laws and what rules we're governed by.
I do. It's kind of sad in this, but it's hilarious at the same time. Is that I've seen it so many times on social media of somebody's like, "Why didn't you just shoot him in the leg?" It's like, do you have any idea what that takes in a stressful situation and they have no firearms training. They just make assumptions, and it's just silliness. But we are at just about 2 hours here, so I think it's a great place. We can wrap it up, get some final thoughts. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you guys, Steve, Travis, Steve, Sean. This has just been fantastic. I got so many notes and so many pieces here that I've been writing down. I've just loved it. Let's get some final thoughts. Anything on team dynamics or anything that's still bubbling in the back of your brain? Let's start with Gowin. Here we go.
There's so much more you can talk about team dynamics, but I will leave it with this. If someone is out there watching this and they thought about team or how to flourish themselves on a team that they're recruiting on, is we talked about a little bit here about doing too much talking. Just let your actions show your intent. If I sit back and I just watch how you move, I will know what you're dedicated towards, and you're always learning, right? So in summary, just let your actions show your intent.
I love that. Travis, final thoughts?
Yeah, the team starts with you, man, the individual. So be a person of good quality character. Be honest and truthful and motivated. And when you're new, just stay quiet, man. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, 100%. Steve, thoughts?
Yeah, all of what those guys said. But I'll just boil it down into one phrase. Like with that team starts with you. Kind of bent to it is be an asset, not a liability. Simple as that.
Love it. Sean, any final thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that Trav chose the subject of team dynamics and all things teams, because it gives us the opportunity to do another discussion on this, because as Three Arrows stated, it's a huge subject, and I feel like I'm just starting to warm up, like we're just getting going. And so perhaps we'll do this in the future, but I will finish with this, and it's a direct quote from Three Arrow, and it is, "Live life through action." Now, I've got a t-shirt from Three Arrow that has that quote on the back, and I love that t-shirt, man, because to me, it defines a large chunk of my life. You can dream about being on a team, or you can create action to live your life on a team. And that's what I've chosen to do. And that's available to anyone, but it isn't available to you if you don't choose action.
Yeah, 100%. I got nothing to add to this, so I just want to say thank you again, as I get to sit here and learn and build and grow. We'll see y'all next week.